The letter claimed that Canada's provincial leaders have offered excuses instead of results and claimed that Michigan Republicans are, quote, done accepting apologies in place of action, and American lungs are paying the price for Canadian inaction. Carney responded to the letter today saying climate change is everyone's responsibility.
I'll give one example. Now we're focusing on investing in clean energy. In the U.S., there's prohibitions now against clean energy. For example, wind energy is one example. Secondly, Canada is maintaining our efforts at the world's scale, and the U.S. is reducing their efforts globally. So, yes, climate change is the responsibility of everyone.
Canada just refused to stay silent after Trump's latest tariff threat. As the U.S. blamed Canada for the smoke, Carney responded with a move that sent a clear message the U.S. could not ignore. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that the United States was being unnecessarily invaded by filthy, polluted, and unhealthy air from Canadian wildfires, and declared that the cost of this pollution must of necessity be added to the tariffs Canada is currently paying. More than 100 million Americans in 18 states and the District of Columbia were under air quality alerts at the time. Very unhealthy and hazardous air quality stretched from northeast Minnesota to southeast Virginia. Hundreds of active wildfires, most in northwestern Ontario, were burning simultaneously. Trump said he would call Prime Minister Mark Carney later that day to find out what Canada intended to do about it. Canada's response did not wait for the phone call. Canada's Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience, Eleanor Olszewski, released a statement highlighting that since 2020, Canada has invested $12 billion in forest sustainability and fire prevention. The statement added that Canada and the United States have a long history of working together to fight wildfires on both sides of the border. A history of bilateral cooperation that both countries have benefited from, and that Canadian officials described as continuing during the current fire season. Trump's Truth Social post characterized Canada's forest management as deliberate negligence. Canada has refused to engage in basic forest management and debris removal, knowing that such refusal will lead to exactly this result, Trump wrote. This is willful negligence and becoming a yearly occurrence, costing the United States billions of dollars. The cost of this pollution must of necessity be added to the tariffs Canada is currently paying. No specific tariff rate, no specific product category, and no legal mechanism for adding wildfire smoke costs to import duties was identified in the post or in any subsequent White House statement. The wildfire smoke tariff threat is the latest extension of a pattern the Trump administration has applied consistently since returning to office in January 2025, using tariffs as a political response to disputes that have no documented legal connection to trade law. Section 232, National Security Tariffs on steel and aluminum, IEEPA tariffs on all Canadian goods, automotive tariffs, lumber tariffs, potash tariffs, and now a Truth Social declaration that wildfire smoke could be added to the tariff schedule. Each previous tariff threat or implementation has required an executive order, a proclamation, or an administrative determination, legal instruments that take time to draft, that face judicial challenge, and that operate within statutory frameworks that do not obviously accommodate environmental liability claims against foreign governments for natural disaster smoke. U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, offered a more conciliatory tone in a statement earlier in the week, noting that Canadians living near these fires are already facing hazardous air quality and pledging to continue a lengthy history of jointly fighting wildfires. This challenge knows no borders, Hoekstra said. The United States will continue to coordinate closely with Canada, just as we have for more than 4 decades of shared wildfire emergencies. The ambassador's statement and the president's Truth Social post were issued within days of each other, describing the same bilateral situation in incompatible terms, one emphasizing shared vulnerability and 4 decades of cooperative response, the other threatening tariff additions for Canadian negligence, Republican lawmakers had already been pressing the case against Canada on wildfires before Trump's July 17th post. A letter from U.S. congressional members to Prime Minister Carney, dated July 2025 and signed by Michigan legislators, accused Canada of chronic underinvestment in forest thinning, fuel reduction, and prescribed burns, along with inadequate enforcement against arson, and threatened direct involvement by U.S. agencies in cross-border fuel reduction and firefighting capacity without specifying what that involvement would entail. That letter was the institutional precursor to Trump's broader social media accusation, establishing a Republican legislative framing that Canada's wildfire management is a bilateral policy failure rather than a natural disaster response challenge. Climate scientists have attributed the proliferation of wildfires across North America to a range of factors, including hot and dry conditions worsened by climate change. The boreal forest is the largest biome on Earth. Saying someone should manage it, it is the equivalent of King Canute commanding the tide to stay out, said Keith Stewart, senior energy strategist for Greenpeace Canada. The only thing we can do is switch to stop burning the fossil fuels that are warming the planet and creating the hotter, drier conditions that fuel wildfires. The boreal forest that covers most of northern Ontario and Quebec, the geographic source of the July 2026 wildfires, spans approximately 1.1 billion hectares across Canada, representing approximately 27% of the world's remaining boreal forest. It is the largest terrestrial biome in the world. The specific claim that Canada should have engaged in basic forest management and debris removal across the boreal zone presupposes a forest management intervention at a geographic scale that has no precedent in any country's forestry policy. Canada's wildfire statistics provide context for the $12 billion investment Olszewski cited. The 2023 Canadian wildfire season was the worst on record, burning approximately 18.4 million hectares, an area roughly the size of the state of Washington. The 2024 season was less severe, but still historically active. The 2026 season, with hundreds of active fires concentrated in northwestern Ontario as of mid-July, is tracking as another significant year in what fire scientists have documented as a decade-long upward trend in Canadian fire activity, driven by documented temperature increases and precipitation pattern changes across the boreal zone. The Trump administration's own wildfire management record is the context that Canadian officials have been careful not to invoke directly, but that media coverage has noted. In 2025, Trump threatened California Governor Gavin Newsom with tariffs over California's wildfire response, saying the state should have kept water flowing for firefighting, a statement that experts said had little basis in fact. During his first term, Trump suggested forest floors should be raked to prevent wildfires. The pattern of attributing wildfire activity to human management failures rather than to climate and weather conditions is consistent across both his California and Canada statements. The FIFA World Cup final is being hosted at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, on the 19th of July, 2026, 2 days after Trump's Truth Social post. Air quality alerts covering the New York metropolitan area at the time of the post prompted concern about outdoor conditions for the match and the millions of fans and broadcast crews involved in the event. The wildfire smoke's timing, reaching maximum intensity in the Northeast corridor during the week of the World Cup final, elevated the political salience of the bilateral dispute in American media coverage in a way that fire seasons affecting the Midwest alone would not have produced.